Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Technologies That Will Drive TV of Tomorrow. I'm Lori H. Schwartz. I'm going to be moderating today's discussion from StoryTech, where I look at all the latest trends. And we are actually going to have a really exciting conversation with, I think 5 really smart guys who really have their hands in every aspect of the ecosystem to sort of get into what trends are real. And a lot of these trends have been, and technologies have been talked about all week. So we're going to debunk some of them that some of our panelists think aren't really that big of a deal. And we're also going to dive into the ones that they think are very real. So we're going to do a lightning round of introductions so we can set the stage for where everybody is sitting in this ecosystem, and then we'll get into some great discussion. And this is an interactive session, as all this week has been with TV of Tomorrow. So please type in your questions. We're going to take them live as they come in, and we're going to have a great conversation with these very experienced guys. So let's start with you, Alex. Tell us all about what you're up to.
Hi, thank you, Lori. Yes, Alex Beach, EasyBroadcast. I'm heading up business and product development and the business in the Americas now. Really, we are a startup based in Nantes, France. We have an end-to-end OTT solution, but really our main focus these days is based around our patents that enable client-level peer-to-peer technology that can offload a lot of traffic on CDNs through client-level delivery.
Great. All right. And that's a focus really on that direct-to-consumer story. And we're going to jump over to Andre.
Yeah, hey, Andrea Christensen. I'm the founder and CEO of Firstlight. We're around 200 video engineers around the world. We built a end-to-end streaming platform that we offer to large streaming direct-to-consumer services out there. And it's a cloud native microservices, insert all the buzzwords. So it's latest and greatest when it comes to technology. And we've been at it for a while. We're a new company, but the team has been around since 2004 and roots in quick play media.
Great. All right. And let's go over to Darren.
Hi, thanks, Lori. Thanks for having me. I'm Darren Lucky, the head of video product management at Verizon Media. And like Alex and Andre, we too offer a B2B service for OTT service providers. Our network and our software stack powers many of the OTT services you all know and love, like ESPN, Fox Sports, and even Sinclair Broadcasting and the Tennis Channel. So it's great to see the rest of the folks here on the panel.
Fantastic. And Scott?
So Scott Ehrlich, I oversee some growth businesses and innovation stuff at Sinclair. So our growth networks, which are over-the-air digital broadcast networks, our owned and operated OTT platforms, Stir and News On, and our content development group, which works on everything from production workflows to new content formats. I just marked the 25th anniversary of the first live streaming event I ever produced. So in case anybody wondered whether I dyed my hair gray, no, it's real gray.
Excellent. And Steve?
Hi, I'm Steve Reynolds, the president of Imagine Communications. Imagine is a provider of technology, products, solutions to the entire television industry. Those products are mainly focused on making television, so we do a lot with production and playout systems, and then on the other side, monetizing television, where we sell ad sales, traffic, and inventory management systems to the large video providers.
Great. So we have really, some of you doing direct-to-consumer, some of you are doing B2B services, some of you are actually focused on generating content for the different platforms that consumers are consuming, and then ultimately actually helping to create the content itself. Let's talk about some of these trends now that I know all week have been coming up, and also we hear all the time, and we're going to get buzzy on purpose. So let's start with 5G, and I want to toss it over to you, Andre, and just talk to me about 5G. How real is it? What do we think? Is it worthy of all the madness that is ensuing right now about 5G?
Well, yeah, thank you. 5G is real. I mean, it's already being rolled out, right? So I don't think we're not speculating if that's going to happen or not. I mean, 5G by itself is an infrastructure, right? So it's one of those things where it's not really interesting unless you look at other technologies and combine with that and the opportunities that creates. Artificial intelligence, as an example, right? It's the type of services that it's enabled, right? But you're talking about an infrastructure compared to the previous generation of 4G, right? That is 10 to 100 times faster, and the latency is incredibly 50 times less, and the density of the sensors and the devices that you can have in an area, it's a lot more, right? So it kind of all the stuff that media loves, right? More bandwidth and more latency or less latency. I mean, all of these other things, right? So that alone enables a load of different types of services and ways of consuming media, and that's the exciting part. But again, it's not really interesting unless you kind of combine it with things like artificial intelligence and all that, right? And there are things happening already now, even the short term, that is substantially different than what you have seen before. Because what has happened is that you're kind of going from a linear way of consuming entertainment, where everybody's kind of watching the same stuff, maybe with some options. And because of the new infrastructure, what it enables you to do is to get a lot more personalized and a lot more immersive experiences, right? So if you're in this, we talked about hockey right before this thing, right? Like you will have combined with camera technologies that are close on the ice and all that, right? With super high resolution and very wide angles, right? You can get all sorts of angles and immersive ways of looking at the game. You can do the processing of this stuff, at the edge, right? So you don't need to kind of have trucks outside, and the away team doesn't have to bring their own camera crews to get all this stuff, right? And for the end user, you can get personalized live streams where you're kind of following your own player and whatever the way that you want to consume it, right? So that's for me, it's the exciting part of the 5G. Is not necessarily the infrastructure itself, but it's like what it enables, given the bandwidth and the latency and all these other things.
Does anybody else want to contribute to 5G? Because I know as a consumer, it's a confusing prospect. Should I spend more? Should I change what I have? What do I do about it? Because it is a marketing term right now for most of us. So any thoughts on that from the consumer's perspective from anybody?
Yeah, I'll jump in here as the resident telco guy. Andre, I don't know how 5G is being rolled out in Canada, but here in the US, it's way more than just bandwidth. We're not just the dumb pipes. I agree that there has to be more. And certainly it is about faster latency. It is about, or less latency, I would say. It is about new use cases, but it's also about new technologies which it enables, right? It's not just new spectrum, but it's also things like moving compute closer to the viewer, right? There's a lot of effort around 5G and multi-axis edge compute or mobile edge compute, where you can take certain things like AR, VR rendering, or AI, like you mentioned, or even video processing and ingestion, and move that closer to the end user to enable better UGC streaming, more effective and more efficient broadcasting of content from venue to the cloud and then back to users. So I don't want to lose the B2B value of 5G in all this conversation, but for consumers, back to your question, Lori, it is going to be about new types of experiences which are enabled. So there may be a little bit of a lag behind the 5G rollout and the kinds of companies and technologies and experiences that will be built on top of that. But Verizon and Verizon Wireless is investing every single day in multi-camera angle streaming, social viewing, e-gaming, all of these things which 5G enables in the home for home connectivity, but also when you're out in the world or when you're at a sports stadium or you're down at the local pub with your friends.
And is it something that you guys, Steve, just even in your content creation world, are you using it as a selling point?
I think where 5G really plays into that is there's been this move in content production and content creation towards IP end to end. So all the way from the camera through to the origination system, doing everything in IP. 5G is a more native way to do that. Once everything is an IP and you're moving across a network that was really built for moving around IP signals, things get easier to integrate. And as these guys have talked about already, the low end-to-end latency is obviously an advantage when you're doing any kind of a live production.
Great. I want to jump to another topic. And again, our audience out there, feel free to toss out any questions to us. But let's talk about 4K and UHD and our alphabet of buzzwords. You cannot move through this world without talking about 4K. So Alex, I want to toss that over to you. How do you feel about this 4K question?
So I've never been, I think the way that things have been kind of fragmented, we've started watching more devices. We've gotten a little bit away from the living room experience of viewing, not completely, but to a large extent, we're watching on devices. It kind of tells me that we have come to a point where good enough is good enough, right? Where 4K is not necessary, right? Now, I don't think that applies ubiquitously, but I think depending on the business models, 4K really doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Now, we do business with in other parts of the world that really aren't 4K really heavy yet. Sub-Saharan Africa, for example, Middle East, there's not a whole lot of that for us, and we don't think it's really that important yet. Now, it's also there's a big cost to it, but I think if we get to a point where, as Darren said, we get to edge computing, where a lot of that cost can be pushed out towards the edge, where we don't have to transport over long distances all these massive files and push it out closer to the edge, then it makes a lot more sense. Otherwise, I'm not a big fan of it. It doesn't make a big difference to me personally, but it's not my world completely.
Is anyone bullish on 4K on this panel? Anyone?
I'll jump in on that one.
Okay.
I really do think that 4K makes a big difference for the right kind of content, and I think what we're seeing, across the industry right now, across the entire environment, is consumer demand. So what the consumer wants is what's really driving the need for higher quality production and higher quality play out and distribution. There are some things in 4K, and I'm talking about sporting events, I'm talking about cinematic, the blockbuster movies. Consumers demand that stuff in 4K. They have screens that are capable of that, and consumers that are watching in that living room environment with that big screen, there's definitely a pull for more 4K content and more 4K production.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'll jump in there. I'm of two minds, right? So as a TV junkie and self-professed video snob, right? I love 4K. I love it. Like, I'd rather watch a movie in 4K. I'd rather watch a Formula One race in 4K. I'd pay a little bit more for that. And so, as a consumer, better video signals equals better experience to me personally, right? As a programmer, as a network executive, it is terrifying. Everything gets bigger, and when files get bigger and bandwidth gets bigger and all the rest of this, you have challenges to navigate, shall we say, right? And so, to me, I'm sort of, I'm stuck between, what I want as a consumer and the challenges it poses in my professional life. That said, if you look at today's video broadcast infrastructure, and you look at what gets broadcast as SD over the air versus how it gets compressed through other distributors, The first time I got it, when I came to Sinclair, I bought an antenna for my TV, and it'd probably been 30 years since I thought that was a thing. But it turns out it is. And when you look at an uncompressed HD signal over the air, it comes pretty darn close to what you see as 4K coming through a more compressed platform. And most people can't tell the difference between those. And so I think that rather than focusing on 4K as a piece of technology, I try to think about the level of consumer demand for higher quality video as the bar and sort of the North Star that I look at as a programmer.
It's like a path on immersiveness, right? Like the difference between 1080 and 4K now, it's very visible to me. You look at a hockey, you look at a game, it's really cool. I pay for it, right? It's awesome, right? I don't know, from that to 8K, I probably won't see the difference, but it feels different. but there's something to say about that immersiveness it already gives. And if you start thinking about it, once you have that thing in the end device and the screens you're looking at, what you can then do if you have higher resolution, I don't think it's going to end. Like we're going to go after higher and higher resolution. But it's not necessarily for the use case to watch that from the same distance. It's your ability to zoom in and do different things with the content and create that individualized experience.
Look, we've already seen 8K stuff, right?
Yeah.
I don't feel a need to go out and buy an 8K TV right now.
I did that. It's useless. Yeah.
But the minute the Masters is an 8K, I'll be first in line.
Yeah, but how do you explain the Super Bowl this year? We didn't even have a 4K stream at an event which typically has no expenses spared, right? It has the highest consumer demand. It's the showcase for all display manufacturers and technologists and broadcasters, and yet it wasn't broadcast in 4K this year. Was that a COVID anomaly, or is that a sign of things to come around challenges for broadcasters?
Well, there is, again, I'm old enough to remember the conversations around the studio network I worked at back in those days, and it went somewhere as just out of curiosity, who's paying us more to have their commercials in HD?
Yeah, nobody.
And the answer was nobody. And so the engineering department's view was, okay, then why are we making this investment? Yep. And eventually it became a regulatory requirement, right? And that's really what pushed the agenda. But, I worked at a network that basically looked at it and said, until we get paid for it, no. And I think to some degree, you look at 4K with the same thing and say, okay, are there advertisers that are going to pay us more to have their commercials in 4K? If so, great, there's a business case and there's an investment against it. If no, then I think it winds up being a longer road, just because the commercial side of it, we're spending a lot of money on infrastructure, we're spending a lot of money on replacing things that work just fine right now to accommodate 4K. And if there isn't really a well understood business case, that becomes a real challenge.
I think one of the problems in talking about an event like the Super Bowl, though, is Super Bowl generally there's one rights owner and there's one path of distribution to the consumer. That's not going to be the case over the long term. There will be multiple paths of distribution. Consumers will have multiple ways of getting content. And then the real challenge becomes optimizing the quality of that content for the device that consumer wants to view it on. Yeah, you're not going to send 4K to a mobile phone, but having the ability to send 4K to the big screen TV, I think ultimately there's going to be demand for that. And even more importantly, it's going to be demand by a base of consumers that advertisers really, really want to get to.
Great.
And Steve, that's sort of my point is it's about getting the best quality video signal for the platform on which it's being consumed to the end consumer.
Yeah, right.
And I think that's more important than any particular flavor of the technology.
It's about attracting the right audience.
Before we talk about that end point and the consumer side of things, let's talk about one more technology buzz thing here, and that's AI. Which was brought up earlier when we talked about 5G, and that 5G and AI will work together. How do you guys think about AI? Is AI a selling point in your conversations with your clients? Is it something consumers should be hearing more in marketing language? Is it something that our viewers, if they're not already leveraging some solutions that provide some AI, services, how do we feel about that? And I know some of you, I think Steve, you had some feelings about it.
I'm going to guess everybody here has some feelings about it, but I'll kick it off.
I think you have strong feelings.
When somebody talks about AI as being the solution to a problem, that takes us down the wrong path, right? You're not going to solve the solution simply by saying, I have an AI solution. That AI, whatever you're doing with artificial intelligence or machine learning, has to be geared towards solving some problem. You can't just tell me you're going to solve it with AI. You got to tell me how you're going to solve it with AI. So I am skeptical when somebody just says, oh, we have an AI solution. The first question I ask them is, okay, well, tell me how the AI makes a better solution to the problem. And in many cases, what we find out is it's actual intelligence that somebody is using to solve the problem, because they understand the problem set, they understand the algorithms, they understand the domains of complexity of the thing that they're trying to solve. They're using AI as the buzzword to try to get people's attention. What I'm really trying to dig into is what is the actual intelligence that you have that you're using to actually solve that problem. We do it every day with ad optimization, right? It's about really understanding how the buy-sell interface works. It's about really understanding what audiences want and how to target the right advertisement to the right audience. There are ways to make that problem easier to solve by using AI and ML, but it's not AI that's solving the problem. It's actual intelligence that's solving the problem.
Actual intelligence is a lot to ask. But I love that point, and let's expand on it if anyone else in the panel wants to jump in. But again, as someone who's spent a chunk of my career marketing, it is a word that's being used right now for sales. And I love what you're saying. You're saying take it out of that cloud of words and talk about what is actually being done with it. Does anybody else have any strong feelings about the role AI plays in our ecosystem and how we should be talking about it or how it should be leveraged?
I'll jump in. I think that I think the obvious examples have been a lot of like personalization or recommendation type mechanisms for it. That's what we've seen, how we've seen AI or machine learning manifested in recent years. But I think there's a real opportunity to see it used in kind of an operational fashion to optimize your delivery networks, to optimize, stream delivery, those kinds of things, using data from client level, from edge, from user level, throwing that back up in real time to better manage like delivery paths, multi-CDN solutions, those kinds of things. I know that some of those are already in play, but I don't know that there are a whole lot of them that really go all the way to the client level. So taking client level all the way back into the algorithms that feed into a complete delivery chain. I think that there's a lot of opportunity for that. So kind of the operational side of things, I think it's really there's a real opportunity for impact there.
I agree with that. I mean, we've built an entirely new platform over the last year, and I can't think of one place in that entire value chain or whatever I should call it, where AI doesn't play or could play a very positive role. And it's already happening. So it's not like a future thing, and it will just accelerate the quality of service. Yep. As you said, the efficiency of it, self-healing, if things are happening out there and with service quality, personalization, creating cohorts where you can have different experiences for different fans and whatever. We talked about sports earlier. Different ways of encoding, reading the material, creating metadata to describe it so you can start doing recommendations without pulling in all the personal information from people. Like there's all these applications and it's across everything, every step in the chain.
So I think what I'm hearing from you guys is that we should be talking about it not as this technology solution, general AI, but more what it's actually doing and the solutions that it's delivering.
Yeah, but it is a fundamental philosophy and an approach that you have to embrace because you have to build for it. Like you have to have a technology that can support it, and it's built with that in mind, because it's like you have that as a use case, you will design an architecture platform differently. It's about how you instrument it and collect data and everything like that. So
I think we're saying the same thing. It's a tool, right? I mean, it sounds like you're doing pattern analysis. It sounds like you're doing trend forecasting. Those are great and valid uses of the technology, of the AI design pattern. But to say that the AI solved the problem is a little bit different than saying we used AI to solve the problem. That's my point.
I agree.
Cool. Great. I like that. All right. I want to jump over to both Darren and Scott and talk a little bit now on the consumer side. Scott educated me a little bit on FAST, and I'd love for you to share that with everybody, because I honestly had not heard that expression before. And you mentioned it a little bit earlier about the antenna and the role it plays and other options. And Darren, of course, you guys are delivering on so many great content channels. So maybe you guys can talk a little bit about what are some of these formats and things that we're all going to be viewing, and how real are they, and what should we be talking about with our clients, with our consumers?
Well, listen, I think, AI-powered NFTs that are configured using ML is really the way to go.
We're going to get to that.
and so someday soon, I hope to know what that all means.
I feel like we're on Clubhouse right now because you mentioned NFT, but that's just.
I am.
But talk to us about.
But in terms of so FAST is a term that I think a lot of people started hearing over the last, really, 6-8 months. There was this phrase that was being used quite widely, which was AVOD linear, which is literally an oxymoron. And people were trying to figure out a way to describe the types of linear channels that we have on Stir, or Samsung has on TV Plus, or Pluto delivers, and AVOD linear was kind of what they got to. FAST, which stands for Free Ad-Supported Streaming Television, or at least that's the version I've seen most often, was a nice way to sort of talk about these new streaming channels. And to me, those are sort of a really, really interesting space, not just because we run a 130 channel service that looks like that, but because if you look at the way it's being integrated, particularly into the TV sets, it's a really pretty compelling consumer proposition. If you have a Samsung TV or an LG TV, or I think Hisense and Vizio have similar kinds of services, and you have an antenna, that antenna is going to bring in the free over-the-air broadcast channels, which here in Los Angeles, there's 205 that I get here, and right into these streaming channels. And so these channels that have great content from the internet or specialty content for niche audiences are able to find a home, and where you have 200 over-the-air channels, or give or take in a market like LA, a FAST service could put potentially an unlimited number of streaming channels associated with that, and it's integrated into a nice single EPG, and that's I think a really, really interesting option, especially as people are looking for options outside of the traditional MVPDs. This gives somebody an option where they've got whether it's through an app like ours or an integrated OEM offering. It gives them it gives them access to the same types of content that, in theory, they would find on an MVPD. Maybe they're older, maybe they're less quality, but they are in fact free. And we keep a list of things we never have to do research on, and one of them is consumers will always like free. And so, to me, it's a really, really interesting thing. And one of the things that we're looking at, as we look at next gen TV. Today the antennas get, a .1, a .2, a .3, a .4, a .5. In the future world of next gen TV, ATSC 3.0, however you want to refer to it, a lot of these things kind of converge. And so we're looking at the FAST channels now and thinking about how that implies something we should be learning and thinking about as we move to next gen TV.
And Darren, do you have some thoughts about it? Because I know you're looking at player features and what that end consumer's experience is like.
Yeah, so So look, I think there's a couple different things at play here, just in terms of the fast channel approach, the services on television. I saw a really interesting chart a couple weeks ago where on one line of they had one line showing the number of channels in the average MVB package from like 2000 till now, and the number of average channels that a consumer watches. And so it went from something like 85 channels on average in 2000 to something like 220 channels now. Yeah. But the line of channels watched was consistent at 17, basically, over the last 20 years. So when we think about the different approaches for delivering content, free over the air, free streaming, ad-supported, subscription models, SVOD, services like Netflix, I think what we're seeing from a lot of our customers is a need to play across, all the different models and ecosystems. So if you're a broadcaster, we have folks who are publishing to Stir, they're publishing to Samsung TV, they're publishing to their own apps and their own subscription services. And the job is really to help consumers figure out the easiest, most efficient way to get to those 17 channels in this new kind of fragmented world, right? So we think it's going to be, more subscriptions. We think consumers will pay for more subscriptions than we think. Like right now, everybody's saying, well, it might not be more than 5 or 6 subscriptions for OTT services. I'm think it's probably going to be north of 10. And the trick is just to find the right mix of how you reach each individual consumer as they kind of reassemble that 17 channel lineup. Back together in this new world. And to that end, the last point you made about player features, there are certain examples of different kinds of content, especially sports, where you can view sports in multiple locations. I think you can watch golf on like 4 different broadcasters right now between NBC, CBS, ESPN, and Turner. Like they all broadcast PGA Tour golf, right? But what we're seeing is a willingness to innovate on the consumer experience to provide differentiated, to provide users a reason to watch on one network versus the other, right? So it'll be, like I said, it'll be things like social interactivity. It'll be more things like gamification, even like wagering and gambling is, the PGA Tour is really leading the way on, bringing that world into the world of golf to make it more interesting. So I think we're going to see a lot of really interesting innovation here in the next couple of years as the competition for those 17 channels for each viewer, really heats up.
And any thoughts from the rest of you on that end note on the consumer's experience? Because I'd love to talk a little bit about subscription. There's so much chatter about that's the future, that everything is about subscription, and I know there are a lot of strong feelings about that too. But is it hybrid? Is it advertising? Is it pure subscription? Like what's the solution? And we have a lot of folks who are building new platforms and new channels and new content models right there in the audience. What should they be thinking about? And a reminder to our audience to please ask questions. You have such a smart group of folks here. Take advantage of them. I always think you should take advantage of people, but we're on a panel right now. So what are your thoughts about subscription?
I'll jump in. And one of the things I think you have to keep in mind about subscriptions is you have to have something people want to pay for. And the bar for that is higher than most people think. Cable in many ways had as a big part of its value proposition a functional proposition. You can get better reception of the broadcast channels you care about by paying us a fee. If it's a pure content subscription, one of the things that at least I try to look very, very, very critically at is there really a piece of content in your offering that is unique enough and high value enough and popular enough to make for a viable subscription proposition, right? Now in the sports world, that's a really easy thing to understand. If you're a fan of the Yankees and the only way to get it is through a subscription, well, the Yokohama Yankees are a great baseball team, but it's not the same thing. And sports content is really easy to understand why that's a great acquisition vehicle, why companies from DirecTV to Fox made early bets on sports as a way to bring consumers into their ecosystems. As you get outside of sports, you get into scripted content and other content, that challenge, I think, becomes sharper, and we have to be really have to be smart, and we also have to be honest with ourselves about where that bar is for consumers in terms of what they're willing to pay for, and really being rigorous about having content that is both unique and compelling and powerful in a way that draws people into those services and gets them to get out their credit card, which is one of the hardest things to get a consumer to do.
I think Scott's right about that. And the other piece is, if you're in the scripted content business, you've got to keep producing that content, right? It's not like baseball where somebody's going to watch all 162 games. If you're in the scripted content business, or even in the business of selling movies, you got to keep making great content to keep that subscription going. And there's a substantial cost associated with making the content. There's also a substantial cost in getting that content out to the consumers on all the platforms they want to watch on. And that's really, I think, what's going to drive this more than anything. It's that fragmentation of the audience, right? Everybody's watching from different devices across different networks via different distributors at this point in time. And that, I believe, leans more towards ad-supported. If you don't know where your audience is going to be, you know there's an audience out there, but you don't know where they're going to be, and you don't know how you're going to reach them. An ad-supported model is actually a better distribution model, because you're not selling the content, you're selling the audience. So as that audience comes to you, you're going to have better opportunities for monetization.
I agree.
Yeah, everybody says some version of I just need to get the next Game of Thrones. Oh, cool. Yeah, there's been one of those in 20 years, guys.
When you asked the question, I was thinking, what are you talking about? Like, people are spending more and more time on ad-supported platforms, right? And all the social media platforms and all the stuff that's going on, right? It's exploding. So, but if you kind of narrow and say, right, it's within the more traditional broadcast world and the OTT world and the streaming services and all that, I think that's right? That's what you strive for, and you can't get paid unless you have something people are willing to get paid for. But I'll give an example for sports as an example, with people that have sports rights and that are now starting to understand the value of the rights that they have goes well beyond that subscription-based service, right? Because you find demographics and cohorts of users that they don't want to watch the entire game. They want to see the highlights. They want to see specific things. They want to see not necessarily even some of the sports. They're more into the star than they are to the actual game, right? So they want to follow what's happening on the social side of things and all that, right? So for a couple of our customers, we see that the value of the short form video clips and the short stuff content they can have, it's starting to be pretty damn valuable, right? And even as valuable as what they can generate from a subscription-based service, and how they can use that in other platforms outside to generate traffic, also to increase the traffic to their own platform.
One of the joys that I have right now is sitting on the board of governors for the Television Academy. And, we have another 8 minutes. I thought it would be fun to just talk to you guys about some newer formats coming out and how you feel about them. And so I'm just going to throw out some buzz expressions and see how you guys feel about them and jump in. There's a lot of talk about blockchain for video distribution and, of course, NFTs, and there are a lot of companies launching now. Of course, most famously, Halsey Miner's company. We also have a lot of chatter about immersive content, so VR and AR. AR, certainly, everyone was bullish on AR, then the pandemic happened and VR took ahead, and now are we back at looking at AR? We have audio-only formats. What role is that going to play? So I'd love to hear from any of you, just lightning fast in our last chunk of minutes here. What are some of these really truly emerging platforms? What's going to light up? What do we think is something to look at, to think about as business folks and content creators? Anybody here?
I'm fascinated by the growth in audio.
Yeah.
I'm just absolutely fascinated by it. It's counterintuitive, but it's also undeniable.
Yeah.
And I'm just personally, that's the one that fascinates. And I never would have said that. On the other hand, when I got into the internet 25 years ago, I never thought I'd be working for a broadcasting company. So but like the growth in audio over the last 2 years, but particularly since the beginning of the pandemic, that fascinates me.
Yeah, even just in the last couple of months, right?
Yeah,
with,
for sure.
With Clubhouse, it's crazy, right?
Yeah.
People
are
are
of the ones that you listed. If you have to kind of force rank them, I don't know if that was the question. Like, I think the whole VR AR thing is going to be very substantial. We're not there, and it's going to take years. But holy crap, that's going to be big. And both in the terms of the content, the way you experience it, and all of that stuff is going to be a game changer. Steve,
did you want to add that?
I was going to add something on the audio bit, which is people are about to start getting in cars again. We have all, over the course of the last year, just gotten so used to having whatever media we wanted whenever we wanted it, right? You're not going to be able to do that when you're driving again. So what's going to satisfy that need? And I think it's going to be podcasting. It's going to be being able to get the audio that you want while you're on your commute again. It's going to satisfy that need for basically personalized type content.
But even the way it creates alternative programming, right? I watched the NFL draft last night. I turned off the audio and turned on Pat McAfee doing his own show on YouTube.
Yeah, great idea. Yeah,
and it was a way better experience almost instantly.
Alex?
And I don't know. I'm fascinated by it. Sorry, I cut somebody off.
Alex was just going to.
So I was going to say, it's obviously we're coming out of the cold weather months. That's the quarantine months. People getting out and exercising. So that, I think we're going to see some kind of an increase anyway. But I'm surprised to see as big as it is. But I think that now people starting to commute in the next few months again. We're going to see that really increase. We have a client in West Central Africa. Audio streaming, and we've seen a large increase in that amount, or the amount of audio content streamed on that platform. So surprising, but exciting too.
Darren, anything that you're particularly excited about that's coming down the pike?
So the things I'm not excited about, I think blockchain is a very slow, very expensive database, which probably has its place in the world, but maybe not in broadcast and media and entertainment. I think NFTs are an even bigger sham built on top of blockchain, basically selling digital receipts to goods that people don't own in order to take advantage of people's understanding or misunderstanding of digital scarcity. So I think that's not going to last very long. I'm probably, of the things you listed, I'm probably, most bullish on AR, given some recent announcements from Apple. I think there's certainly some real world applications that are coming together that go beyond Pokemon Go, which I think is probably people's most front of mind example of what AR is. But I think there's going to be a lot more practical uses of it emerging, and to see device manufacturers and broader ecosystem support coming together, I think is a good sign. VR. Maybe when we have self-driving cars powered by 5G AI, we can keep our headsets on as our cars drive us to work, so we can watch all that video content that we've got used to. But I still think the goggles are a big hoop to jump through for a lot of consumers, and I think will remain kind of a niche.
Well, I know what I'm doing right after I get off this call. So
yeah.
Well, Laurie, just listening to all this, I actually want to shout out to some of the small technology changes that combined are pretty big. It's a bit
Please take it out.
You look at things like cloud native and Kubernetes and Go programming language, Jenkins X, so you can do CI/CD in the cloud, all these nerdy small things, but combined, it has a massive impact, right, on the cost and time to market, and the cost of failure is way down, right? You can test things out, and you can truly drive personalization. So I think there's a lot of these smaller ones that
we collaborated with Steve's team on cloud-based playout for our broadcast networks.
Yeah. Great.
And we're a little bit early, so it's a little bit of a technical high wire rack, but the benefits it paid off for us immediately.
Yeah.
and what we're expecting from it in the future could be transformational for our old school over-the-air broadcast business.
Yeah, being able to stand up more channels and stand them up in days instead of months. I mean, that's going to change the business.
Well, gentlemen, we have to wrap, and I know there are so many more great topics like Andre just mentioned that we could dig into, but I want to thank Scott, Alex, Andre, Darren, and Steve for sharing some insights and really digging into the alphabet soup that will be TV of tomorrow and helping us shed some light on what's real and what's not. And there is some more great content coming in the next last few hours of this fantastic week at TV of tomorrow. So I'm going to toss it back over to the show and thank all of you fantastic gentlemen for sharing with us what's really happening. You guys are in the thick of it, and we so appreciate your insights. I'm Lori H. Schwartz from StoryTech, and it's been such a joy to get to talk to all of you. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Lori. Thanks, everybody.
Lori.